Truth. Unforbidden. Truth. Podcast. Unforbidden. Truth. Podcast.
Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. Today I'll be speaking with Abu Khalid Abdul-Latif, formerly known as Joseph Anthony Davis. In June 2011, Latif was arrested and charged with conspiracy to murder officers and agents of the United States. He had planned on attacking a MEPS, Military Entrance Processing Station, on East Marginal Way in Seattle, Washington. A military entrance processing station is a facility that is staffed with all branches of the military as well as civilian workers. These facilities are used to process those that are looking to join the military by medically, physically, and morally screening them against the Department of Defense standards. The planned attack included using hand grenades and machine guns. Latif and his co-defendant, Wali Mujahid, took possession of machine guns they had purchased, and they had planned on using them during their attack on the facility. Law enforcement had been monitoring the two of them and their recent activity, including the machine gun purchases, which is how this attack was prevented. The machine guns that were sold to the two were actually inoperable and didn't pose a risk to the public, unbeknownst to the two men that purchased them. The men originally planned on attacking Joint Base Lewis McChord near Tacoma, Washington, but their target was later changed to the military entrance processing station. They had planned on carrying their attack out with grenades and machine guns, causing maximum damage and casualties. Law enforcement had been notified by a citizen that claimed he was approached about taking part in the attack and supplying weapons to the two men who were planning the attack. The individual who was approached agreed to work with law enforcement. He began monitoring the two men, spending more time with them, even wearing a wire and small devices that recorded video attached to their clothing. Both men were captured on audio and video, speaking about the attack that was going to be taking place at the military entrance processing station. Here's a few quotes I found from justice.gov/OPA/PR/2 men plot attack military processing center. Driven by a violent, extreme ideology, these two young Americans are charged with plotting to murder men and women who were enlisted in the armed forces to serve and protect our country. This is one of a number of recent plots targeting our military here at home, said Todd Hennon, Acting Assistant Attorney General for National Security. The threat was averted by the combined efforts of the federal, state, and local law enforcement officers that make up the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. The FBI remains committed to utilizing intelligence-based investigations to thwart would-be terrorists, said Laura Laughlin, special agent in charge of the FBI Seattle Division. This case epitomizes the value and capabilities of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force concept as a means of preventing acts of terrorism. But for the courage of the cooperating witness and the efforts of multiple agencies working long and intense hours, the subjects might have been able to carry out their brutal plan. This attack was foiled because of the trust and relationships the men and women of the Seattle Police Department enjoy with our community, said Seattle Police Chief John Diaz. The complainant felt safe approaching a Seattle police detective, and in doing so, ended the plot intended to take innocent lives. This cooperative investigation involving local, state, and federal partners worked exactly as intended. Both Mujahid and Latif were charged by complaint with conspiracy to murder officers and employees of the United States, conspiracy to use weapons of mass destruction, and possession of firearms, and furtherance crimes of violence. Both men faced up to life in prison. Wali Mujahid was convicted and sentenced to 17 years in a federal penitentiary, followed by 10 years of supervised release. Latif was convicted and sentenced to 18 years in a federal penitentiary, followed by 10 years of supervised release. I want to round out the introduction to this interview with a paragraph I took from archives.fbi.gov. And I quote, "In their sentencing memo, prosecutors described multiple times where Mujahid described his enthusiasm for the attack and his terrorist motivations. During the planning sessions for the attack, Mujahid made clear that he was eager to kill his intended victims, and as many as possible. He made numerous statements along these lines, while he and Abdul-Latif planned out the play-by-play movements of the attackers using the map of the Federal Center South building," prosecutors wrote in their sentencing memo. Let's start off with talking about your childhood. Where were you born?
San Diego, California.
Can you recall the first positive memory you had as a child?
When my brother was born in 1982, my mom just gave birth to him, and my dad took me by of hand to the birthing room where all the babies are at. That's where I saw my brother for the first time. That was the earliest memory.
What about your first earliest negative memory as a child?
Ooh, that's a good one. I had asked my dad to let me ride his beach cruiser, his bike, and he let me. And I was riding around the block, and I came around the corner, and there was a police car standing there with a couple cops hanging out in front of the police car. They pulled me over and stopped me, and talked to me about them looking for a stolen bicycle. And I tried to explain to them, this is my dad's bike. Well, actually, they specified that they were looking for a 10-speed. But as we know, beach cruisers are 10 speeds. I said, this is my dad's beach cruiser. I don't know what you're talking about. So they asked me a couple other questions, and then all of a sudden, they want to take my picture. So they walked me across the street and had me stand against the wall of his house and take my shirt off, and then they took my photo right there on the street. And then they let me ride off. I never told my parents about it, even to this day.
Was that the law enforcement that took a photo of you?
Yeah, I was only 5 years old.
Did you suffer any childhood abuse or trauma?
I mean, they didn't beat me or nothing or anything like that. My dad basically was neglectful, and once my mom moved and she had to work, she had no choice but to leave us alone. She was on her own. But, in my earlier years, before the group homes, but...
How old were you when you were starting to get neglected?
Well, if you want to go to my dad, it probably started sometime before I was 10. He would pick us up from my mom's for the weekend, and then he would drive us to his friend's house. And sometimes he would leave us there and not come back, and that friend would have to drive us back to our mom's house. This was all before we left San Diego, and my mom moved us to Washington State.
Once you got to Washington State, did you go through any abuse or any trauma for that matter?
No, I just missed my dad. I didn't really understand at the time my dad's position, but I loved my dad. I just pressed my mom hard enough, and she sent me right back down to him in San Diego. I think I was 12 then when that happened.
So it sounds like you were close with your dad growing up. Were you close with your mom too?
I was actually closer to my mom than I was to my dad. I tried to be close to my dad, but he didn't want that on the other hand. He wanted to live his life. And that's what he did. Looking at that as a 44-year-old, that's the way I see it.
So looking back as a child then, did you feel like you were close with him but he wasn't close with you?
I think I tried to be close to him. I wanted to be, but it never really got there. He wasn't the type of man that would take me fishing and camping and all that type of stuff. He just did his thing, on his own.
Can you recall what your behavior was like going back as early as you can remember?
I think I was a good kid, It was really when my mom left San Diego where I started to kind of fall off a little bit. I stopped going to school, and I was disrespectful to my mama, and I would basically bug her all the time, and until she's like, "Look, you need to go with your dad." She put me on a bus and sent me back down to my dad. Even when that happened, I ended up in a group home a few months later. The move didn't work, so.
What was your experience like at the group home? Were you treated fair or did anything go on there?
At the beginning years of it, I just kept running away from the group homes, and
Why would you run away?
I either didn't like the situation or I started thinking about my dad and I wanted to go back
Do you remember what your behavior was like in school, more so in your middle school and high school years?
Well, when I did go to school, my middle school years, you know, I got into a little trouble, and there was even a time where was suspended, and I couldn't come back to my dad. So my dad spent the whole day with me in school. He wasn't very happy with that. That's one situation. But then I never really went back to a public school until my senior year. I spent a lot of time in special schools and stuff for behavior issues and things like that. I mean, I was smart and I had potential, but I just wasn't a good student. But fortunately, alhamdulillah, I passed all the grades and moved right through school. Somehow, I don't know, but I made it.
Did you graduate high school?
Yeah, I graduated in 96. I actually just remembered, I actually failed the 5th grade when I was in San Diego, but when my mom took us and moved us up to Washington State, and she put me back into 5th grade, somehow I was able to convince the teacher that there was a mistake. So they went right ahead and just put me right into 6th grade. I thought that was pretty cool that I was able to get that done. So I actually got to move right into the 6th grade instead of having to do the 5th grade over. I just thought that'd be an interesting note.
Have you been diagnosed with any mental illnesses?
I didn't have neurological issues, but other than that, nah.
Were you or any of the members of your household religious growing up?
No.
Did you have any interest in Islam growing up?
No.
Did you engage in any type of criminal activity as a juvenile?
No, not. I mean, I got into a couple fights, and I spent a couple days in juvenile hall a couple times, but nothing really super criminal or anything like that.
Did you engage in any type of criminal activity up until the case that landed you in prison after turning 18?
Yeah, I've been convicted of a robbery in 02, and I was convicted of a custodial assault, which I'm not guilty for, but was found guilty for anyway while I was serving my statement. Those are really the major ones that I have.
Was it a bank robbery?
Just a dumb corner store robbery.
When did you first become religious, as a young adult or, when you were older, more specifically when it comes to Islam?
Well, I entered into Islam back in 2002. It's about 20 years now.
What was it that got you interested in it to want to practice it?
Well, I didn't really know anything about the religion, but strangely enough, there is this show on TV, and it depicted a group of people in a setting who were Muslim, and I kind of liked how they were, together and unified, and looked out for each other and loved each other, and I don't know, I just thought about that. It really, lit a fire under me, and got me more interested in the religion, and I eventually became a Muslim.
Did you attend mosques and services in Seattle?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
How often would you do that?
I go every Friday. I even go a couple times on the weekends for extra classes.
Were you ever introduced to anyone that might have belonged to any, extremist groups or organizations when it came to Islam?
No, I've never personally encountered anybody.
So you weren't friends with anybody, at the time that might have had links or anything?
Well, on YouTube, I talked to a few different people. I don't know what they were into. There's just this one guy that they took an interest in. I think his name was Russell Dennison or something. And I didn't find out till a few years ago, actually, that, he was being watched by the federal government. And I don't know what happened to him since then, but I believe that a phone call with him only had one phone call, and we weren't talking about doing anything illegal. We were talking about working together, making more videos together to call people to the religion and do dawah work. That was pretty much what the phone call was about.
Was there any talk of like violence or anything at the time, like bombs or anything of the sort at the time, or?
No, there is nothing like that between us. They were just watching him. I don't know it for.
Prior to the case that you were arrested for and convicted of, that you're in prison for now, how did you feel about the current state of America as well as the United States military at the time?
Well, I felt that some of them were openly committing crimes and boasting about it online, especially some of the military personnel overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan, and some of their own illegal acts against the Muslim community. And there was just a lot that I saw that bothered me. I mean, I could have handled myself better, but you know, when you got them stepping over bodies and boasting and shooting and blowing up masjids and doing things to antagonize Muslims online, it just got to me. That's all.
Were there any specific incidents that any soldiers or military personnel might have been involved in that angered you to the point of wanting to say, like, screw the government, screw the military, I'm going to show them? Like, was there anything, that angered you to the...
Speaking of my mindset back then, there was the one where those soldiers out of Fort Lewis, they were killing Muslims and stepping over their bodies and posing over their dead bodies. And there was one where a U.S. military soldier was on YouTube teaching a young kid, how to say bad words and teach him how to say stupid things. And then another one that bothered me was when they were filming it from a tank that they were in, and there was a minaret to a mosque, and they were shooting their cannon at the mosque, and they blew it up, and it fell down. And then there was another one that I saw that when they entered a mosque, when people were praying, they went there and shot everybody. These are things I saw on YouTube, among other things. But these specific things I remember and I'll never forget.
Just crimes committed against Muslim people in the Middle East. That's what sparked your anger towards the government and the military and wanting to, I guess, go extremist in a way?
Well, I wouldn't say all that, but, it bothered me. It bothered me a lot, where I didn't really use my head. I wanted to go overseas, and support the Muslims over there. I never was intending on doing anything, committing any terrorist acts in the United States.
Did it ever go through your mind to travel to the Middle East to perhaps meet with somebody like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of those groups?
No, not really. I wanted to go. I more or less wanted to go there and move there permanently. There are a couple of Muslim countries that I can go and teach English and make a good living, or maybe get something going here where I get some money rolling and make what's called a hijra, means to move to a Muslim country, and give myself a place of residence, find me a co-wife, and have some more children, and support Islam in the any way that I can, but not nothing ever to commit a terrorist act. But Al-Qaeda and ISIS and them, that was not really my focus. I more or less just wanted to get to a Muslim country.
When and how did you meet your co-defendant in this case?
Well, I knew him before that. He was a new Muslim. But I can't remember why but he left Seattle and went back to California. And I think that's where his ex-wife is at, and his son, and most of his family are at. We never discussed committing any terrorist acts. We didn't talk about that, commonly. We didn't talk about that commonly. We talked maybe 2 or 3 times about the atrocities committed against the Muslims overseas. And, I believed that I would have the right to speak my mind about that. But, I just allowed it to get out of hand, and I didn't stop it when I could. And this is what ended up happening.
Let's talk about what did happen. You're serving an 18-year federal prison sentence and 10 years of supervised release upon your release from prison of conspiracy to murder U.S. officers and conspiracy to use weapons of mass destruction. Can you walk me through everything that led up to these charges, starting with the conversations you had with your co-defendant, and go from there?
Well, it didn't start with a conversation with my co-defendant. It started with, a conversation with the informant who I felt I can confide in. And according to the government, he wasn't an informant at the time. We were both angry about atrocities committed overseas. And so I was talking to him about my desire to go travel overseas and, go help the Muslims over there and even go live over there. And he's the one he initially made the statement, look, well, we can just do something here. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, we don't have to go overseas to do something. We can do it right here. And so initially he sparked that conversation, and as ignorant as I was, I agreed with that. And the idea about Fort Lewis came up because that's where those soldiers were from, who were posing with the dead bodies in Afghanistan. And so I guess he went to another friend who I learned now was already a federal informant. Because when I talked to my informant, it was on May 30th. And on June 2nd or 3rd, the guy that my informant talked to, he went to the Seattle Police Department by himself and went and talked to a couple of detectives, Tomlinson and De Jesus. And then the very next day, both of the informants went in there, and they did a non-recorded interview, and then the next day, they did a recorded interview with my informant. And it was at that point they put a wire on him and sent him after me. And the conversation just got out of hand. And I allowed myself to get sucked in, and I don't know. It just shouldn't have happened. I should have just not have talked about it at all.
So the judge in your trial said that there was evidence of you conducting surveillance on the military base. How long have you been surveilling, and how frequently would you do so?
We only drove by the place a couple of times. That was it. We didn't. At one time, the informant walked with me to the front door, and we turned around and left. And that was really the only time that we came anywhere close to surveilling anything. It wasn't like we were out there with goggles and machine guns or anything like that you see in the movies. It really wasn't, it wasn't like that.
Were you guys looking for weak spots at the facility, back entrances or, back gates, or what times that, they did shift change where you could get in easier, or?
Well, what he did is we talked about, it was suggested that he go inside and just walk through and see what was going on, and so that's what he says he did. But supposedly the FBI went there with him and allegedly walked through the place, and they gave him a diagram. But the building has a child care attached with it, and that was never made known to either one of us. So they gave him a bogus diagram, because the diagram he showed me is not actually what was said, because it was mentioned in the testimony of the agent for the grand jury that there was a child care there. We never knew about that, and so I think that the child was used to keep me on the path to fall into this trap.
This attack plot included machine guns and hand grenades. Tell me about how everything came about with choosing the type of weapons that would be involved, why this specific Seattle military complex, and what was the reason behind this attack or this planned attack at the time?
At the time, we were upset with military intrusions and invasions and occupations of Islamic countries. And again, like I said before, we were motivated by crimes committed by the military, and deposing over the dead bodies, the blowing up of masjids, the killing of Muslims in the mosques, and the invasions of Muslim countries, and it just added fuel to the fire. But as far as the weapons are concerned, I don't know nothing about guns. I've heard of an AK-47 and a Tech 9 a Tech 9 and a Glock. That's all I've ever heard of. I never used guns. I don't have any experience. It was the informant who actually suggested the types of weapons that were involved.
Was the hand grenade and the machine gun, were you guys just trying to use weapons that would inflict like maximum damage?
That was the idea, yeah.
How did the meeting go between yourself and the confidential informant in this case, or I should say meeting or meetings that helped secure the convictions in this case?
He just came to my house, and I wish I can. I have the transcripts with my wife over there in Auburn, and he was just recording, and he tried to keep me on one path, and keep me going on. And that's what he told the cops in his first recorded interview. When he told them that I was planning to attack Fort Lewis, and he said he didn't know what to do and he was scared. But that's what he told our witness. But he told the police that he wanted to keep me going on the path of this. I can't quote it, but it's something like that.
How long after that meeting took place with the confidential informant were you and your co-defendant arrested?
The whole thing was about 3.5 weeks.
Did you know that you were being watched or followed?
No, I did not, and I did not know that the informant, whose name is Robert Childs, by the way, was doing anything either. But when I go back to think about it now, I understand that there were things that were said and done where that should have been wake-up calls for me, that this wasn't right. I should have got away from this and calmed myself down, that this was wrong.
How did your arrest go down when you were arrested, being that these were, considered, I guess, terrorist, charges for a lack of, better words at the time? How was your arrest handled at the time?
Well, when he brought us to pick up the guns, he brought us to a warehouse, over off 188th and Pack Highway. Little did I know that there was a federal prison over there, but anyway, he walked us over there. He pulled out a couple of AR-15s from behind one of the old cars, and he showed them to us. He demonstrated how to use them, put them in bags, and as we were walking back out to the car, the feds invaded the building, and we were arrested. It's all on camera.
And was that all peacefully? You didn't try to run or try to shoot at them or anything?
No, it was peacefully.
Were you held in a county jail at first, or were you in federal custody right away?
I was put in federal custody. I was in the SHU from June 2011 all the way till March of 2013. I was on the top floor, no contact visits, 1 hour outside the cell a day, no outside, one 15-minute phone call a month, limited commissary, and I only got to see my wife and son through a TV screen. I did get 2 visits, contact visits, near the end of my time there, but it was very rough. And throughout the years, when I've traveled around the country, I've discovered people with similar cases who were never put in the SHU, who were never isolated. They're in population fighting their cases. But they locked me up in the SHU, which really limited my ability to fight my case and investigate and do what I needed to do to prepare for myself for trial. And I was boxed in, basically, because of my inability to defend myself.
Were you offered any type of plea deals while you were on trial?
Yeah, I was offered several of them. My co-defendant took 30 years. That was his first plea deal. They offered me 30 years, 28 years, 25 years, 20 years. I'm refusing all this. And the day before an evidentiary hearing, my lawyer pressures me into taking a 17 and 19-year plea agreement and telling me if I take this deal, they'll give my co-defendant the same thing. So I also felt that I would be helping my co-defendant out to get his sentence down. Because if he lost a trial, especially during those times, they would have given us a life without parole, without losing a minute of sleep. And so I had to think about the whole picture. And this is how we ended up at him getting 17 and I'm getting 18 years.
There were some YouTube videos that you had posted years ago that were used during your trial. Do you remember what you had said on some of those videos that were used as evidence?
No, I really don't, because I never spoke in favor of terrorism. I openly said I didn't support terrorism in any way. I didn't support the killing of innocent people. I've stood by this. But I let my emotions get the best of me in this situation. And even though, you know, what I saw, that what they were doing was wrong, you know what I'm saying, there's a better way to handle it. And, you know, but no, I didn't speak in favor of Al Qaeda or Al Shabaab or any of that. I was just speaking as far as the deen and supporting Muslims overseas who were actually fighting for the right causes, defending their homelands from occupations, and encouraging Muslims to stand as one and unite and be an ummah, be Muslims, and support the Muslims regardless of what the non-Muslim leaders around the world have to say about it. So, in a nutshell, that's what it is. We don't have time to go any further into it, but...
You didn't make any statements during your trial. Was that your decision or was that your defense team's decision for you not to speak?
It's a little both. I did write a letter to the judge the day of my plea agreement, the day I accepted the plea. But other than that, yeah, I didn't speak. It was a choice of either one of us or both of us.
After you were convicted of plotting to attack the military installation in Seattle, you were convicted and sentenced to 18 years in prison and 10 years supervised release. What was your reaction to not only your conviction, but your sentence?
I was dumbfounded, but I realized that I could have gotten a lot more time. You know, I'm just concerned with just getting home now. You know, I really feel like I was over-sentenced. My crime was not violent. I couldn't get any relief during the COVID home confinement, even though they let people out who killed cops, career criminals, life sentences, people who have way more time and longer criminal records than I did. I was just basically a pawn, a political pawn, because it wasn't long after that Jenny Durkin became the mayor of Seattle, who was the federal prosecutor in my case.
You've been incarcerated going on 11 years now. What does an average day consist of for you in a federal penitentiary?
Just, well, right now with COVID, not much. I'm just studying my religion and staying out the way, hoping for a miracle and get out of here sooner than I expect. Pretty much it.
So I'm curious, with the conviction that you have, are you kept away from other prisoners or perhaps grouped with other prisoners that have similar charges to yourself?
No, I mean, at first I was treated kind of tough, but over the last few years, I'm not really, you know, put to the side like other people. I'm just like anybody else.
From what I hear about BOP, they like to move inmates from time to time, frequently at that, for security reasons. What's the process of moving from one federal penitentiary to another? Do you know? And have you had to go through that?
Well, it varies. I mean, they move for different reasons. Um, but I've been, I was, I've never been moved because of my case. You know, I've been moved, basically for medical reasons. When my custody level dropped, I got moved. Um, I had somebody go to the lieutenant and lie on me to get me off the yard before. Um, there were yards I just wanted to get off of because I was too far from home, and I made moves that way. But yes, they do just yank people off the yard and ship them out. Sometimes they'll put people in isolation for a few months and then move them. Um, Sometimes people check in off the yard. There are various reasons, but there are a lot.
Do you know if you're classified as a domestic terrorist by the FBI and or Homeland Security?
Yeah, they classify me as that.
Do you think that would be accurate?
No, it would not be accurate.
So you said that you're a practicing Muslim today, right?
Yeah, I've been doing it going on 20 years.
Do you think that'll follow you even after prison?
Yeah, I believe so. I pray I'm a Muslim for the rest of my life.
Does any of the institutions you've been in more so offer any type of rehabilitation programs for offenders that aren't serving life or death sentences for that matter? Like, education or anger management or any type of like certification, anything of the sort?
Yeah, I've taken some classes over the years like that. Anger management, commitment to change, um, different types of thinking classes. Like a yoga class. I've taken a few other things. I have a list, but I don't remember every class offhand right now. But yeah, they do offer some things.
Looking back on your life, do you think there's anything that you could have done to prevent everything that went down with this case, the attempted, plot and so on and so forth? What could have been done to prevent that from, going to prison and, getting in this big pickle?
Well, first of all, I could have had the correct knowledge of the religion. I didn't know it. I didn't have a lot of knowledge of the religion. And with knowledge and common sense, those two main factors could have kept me out of this situation. Because there were also things when I think about it now that the informant, who by the way was just sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for a third strike on a rape case. There were certain things that he was saying to me throughout the process that should have let me know that this was wrong and or that he was actually trying to set me up. But I tell people, correct knowledge of the religion, the wisdom of my situation could have saved me from this situation. I just tried to make the best of it, and I feel like I have.
So you should be getting out of prison in less than a decade.
Do you have any goals or plans?
Well, yeah, I want to think about maybe trying to get my CDL, do a couple other things to provide for my family, and work more with the community to help unify the Muslims and share some of my experience and knowledge of the religion that I gained to hopefully encourage and motivate Muslims to seek and act upon knowledge rather than emotion and anger. That hopefully save Muslims from falling into this behavior.
That was my interview with Abu Khalid Abdul-Latif. Head on over to patreon.com/unforbiddentruth. You can get access to additional interviews, access to a virtual true crime gallery, and much more. Thank you for listening.
Unforbidden truth. Unforbidden truth. Podcast. Unforbidden truth. Podcast.